Hey everybody, Sean Hawk here. So I'm starting to put more videos on this channel, my new channel. Like I said, because the other one's been shadow banned so much for talking political and other controversial things. So this one's going to be somewhat mellow, this channel here. Today I want to talk about some of the healing parts of the earth that are kind of important, I think. Not just for now, but for things coming up in the near future. You know, a lot of the talks about the climate change, global warming, and all the other narratives. Now, I've been watching these narratives and all this stuff coming up, God, since the late 60s. Yeah. And I've watched it change from we're going into another ice age to global warming, we'll all be flooded, to the last thing AOC said was, you know, we're all going to be dead in 10, 12 years, you know. What do I think humanity is responsible for the climate change? Because remember, we went from ice age to global warming, and then we'd have these massive blizzards or heat waves, and so they just said climate change, you know. Okay. Making greenhouse gases is not good. I'll put that. Plundering people's nation's economy into abstract poverty is not good either. Destroying people's lives and not good. It has to be a global effort. It really does. So you're taking Western Europe, United States, and a few other countries, and then trying to make these drastic changes in their lifestyle for climate change and protecting the environment. At the same time, India and China are opening up 10 new coal-powered power plants every week. So it's really not going to do it. And if you want to talk about some real disaster for the environment, warfare. And the United States leads the campaigns on numbers on, you know, global warfare. And that's coming from a United States Marines perspective there, okay? Matter of fact, the vehicles that I used to operate, all of them under the engine compartment hood, said this vehicle, this machine is exempt from all EPA regulations. And so, and the other thing, honestly, you know, every piece of equipment you see in the military is designed for two things: killing people and destroying things, neither of which is good for the environment. So that goes to, like, well, what am I doing? Like I said, you know, I'm building this boat that I'm going to be using for environmental work. It doesn't have an engine, it's going to have solar panels and all that. But at the same time, instead of cutting down a lot of trees to make a traditional boat, I use a lot of polymers. You know, I use epoxy. A lot of the glues and stuff like that, and they're petroleum products. So they'll last for a long, long time. I didn't cut down any trees. Yeah, plywood has, you know, it's made from trees, but it's usually made from the leftover stuff from the trees, the sawdust and glue, and they press it into these sheets. And today's plywood's pretty good. It's almost marine grade, and if it's sealed up with epoxy and fiberglass like I'm doing, it's pretty much an environmentally sound boat that will last a while. And like everything needs maintenance. I gotta tell you that I'm happy to see that the anti-fouling agents for the bottoms of boats these days has a less of a negative impact on the environment that they had, you know, when I first started boating back in, you know, the late 60s, early 70s. So that's a good thing. And if we keep the effort up, we can still make constant improvements. And I really believe with the vote of the people, and now in this case, it's really about what you spend your money on. Yeah, a lot of big companies are buying up all the small ones so they can control these things, you know. But if we just pay attention to this stuff instead of scrolling and twerking and all the other things on the media platforms, you know, we can do this collectively, okay? So all that being said, the thing that really worries me about the environment is how people can order by mail these synthetic viruses and stuff like that. That's an environmental issue that not many people are talking about. They got all focused on the green and the solar and all this other stuff. And speaking of which, you need about 30% more materials to build an electric car than you do a conventional car. That means a lot more mining. So you need more mining, but then they're putting mining restrictions, which makes the mining process go up. So they're making all this stuff for the green efforts, increase in price. People will do without, so it's going to cause more financial hardships. Now, the problem with that is when people start having financial hardships, they start making shortcuts in their life that are not environmentally friendly. They start burning things that they shouldn't because their heating bill's too high. So they start burning other stuff. It just puts in other things in the air. The other part about the climate change that it's not too good and polluting and all that is when they're having these summer of loves and all these riots and looting. And yeah, when you're burning, you say you're burning something like this plastic, it sends up some heavy, heavy toxins into the air. And it rains back down into humans and other animals eating it. It goes into your food. You can have an organic garden, but you get rained with a bunch of this stuff. It comes down. Now you're eating that as well. So we have to, again, the virtue has to be critical thinking and complete thought. But going back into the synthetic viruses, you can go and order this stuff online. One of the things I was listening to one tape recording is one of the side effects when they do this stuff can be ecocide, meaning that a species can go extinct. Here's another thing with a critical thinking and complete thought. When Monsanto started using the open air terminator gene, and basically that means that this corn plant grows up, and it used to be you could let that corn cob dry out, and take each corn kernel and plant it the next year, and that was going to become your next crop. Well, for some reason, I'm sure all kinds of reasons, but there's a few reasons that Monsanto made the open air terminator gene, meaning that corn seed, that kernel from that cob of corn, will not produce another plant if you put it in the ground. You have to always buy the seeds from them. You can't, like we've been doing for millennia, save the seeds, plant them, and then make a better crop. When you start looking at things like eggplants, bananas, corn, in its original form, it's not the pretty, useful plant that we have now. So we took something and we kept nurturing it. And by the nurturing it and taking the best seeds and replanting those, you got a better crop. It's the long version of genetic modification, but it's an organic type. Meaning things. So if I have squash growing, I love squash. I'm going to take my biggest plant, my biggest fruit, the prettiest one, and I'm not going to harvest that. I'm going to let that go to seed. And I'm going to take those seeds, and that's what I'll plant the next year, and I'll get a better crop. Because I'm going to get a better crop because it's used to the soil where it came from, and it's the biggest and best and healthiest one that I have. If I have a big one, but it's not that healthy for whatever reason, and I have a smaller one that's very healthy, I'll take the seeds of that one because I'll nurture that, and it'll become a big one later. So that's the first types of genetic modification, which I think is great. It's organic. But with these other things, when they're doing these other genetic and synthetic viruses and so on, they're saying that you can't have this cross-contamination. And one of the things you can have, besides mutations into people eating the food, is all of a sudden a species can just be wiped out or maybe even become poisonous. Imagine you can no longer eat apples or something like that. And they really don't know what can happen with these things. Oh, well, we'll find out in 10 years. Well, that may really be a bad result that you don't want to have, And there's some people who are just like, no, this has too many loose ends. Let's just not experiment with this. But then you have people who can just order this stuff online. Now, I'm not into government interference and things, but I think sometimes, people shouldn't be able to buy radioactive material to make nuclear bombs or make, biological weapons and things like that. And there's always those people that will do these kinds of things. But I have a real problem with that. I think that's ecocide is one of the worst things I think we have coming down the line as far as environmental issues. But people, the environment is important, but it's important for us to go back in touch with it. Now, people want to eat organic and everything, and then they complain that it's expensive because it's labor intensive. I've been doing the organic thing before it was cool. Okay, most people in poor areas that were doing farming were doing organic because they couldn't afford herbicides, pesticides, and fertilizers. We had to compost everything, and that was just the way it was done. It's a good way to do that. Let me give you an example of how the earth can really heal things. I was renting a farm in South Alabama, Alberta, Alabama, and um, in front of it, or in between my property and the other one, there were these roses, and these roses grew about not quite the size of a tennis ball, a little bit bigger than a golf ball, in groups of threes. Very beautiful, usually an off-white color, very fragrant. And I had asked the owner of the farm, and I said, what are those? Is this a type of hybrid? And he laughed. He goes, no, that's the original rose. These roses you see out there, these really big ones, those are the hybrids. He goes, I'll tell you what, I was noticing that you didn't trim in front of your fence. Take one of those long stems that don't have a bud on it. And I had one of them like 3-4 feet long. You know how roses like to go kind of wild. He said, bend it over to where it'll touch the ground, scrape off some of the bark, and put some good dirt on top of it, enough to hold it down. And the original species will grow out the other side. So I did. I took a real big flower, it was a off-white, real big one, put it down there, and then a bunch of the little ones came out after that, stronger smelling, prettier, heavier petals, and it was like the ground set it right. It took the hybrid thing away and put out the original version. And that impacted me a lot. It was about the healing of the earth. The other thing that I noticed is looking when you're going to a new area of what to grow, look at the ground. And if you have really like lots of clover, lots of soft greens, that you'll be able to grow your soft veggies in there, your lettuce, your softer greens, spinach. Also, but when you look in the wild areas and you see your healing herbs, that will tell you what the predominant or most dominant ailment is in that area. Like I lived in Bat Cave, North Carolina, just outside of Asheville. We had lots and lots of mullein, tall mullein. I mean, 5-foot tall mullein, big bright colors, and heavy leaves. And that's good for respiratory issues. And so we had lots of that in there. We'd have this heavy fog come in, and people were always getting these heavy, wet coughs, earaches and stuff. And we would take the flowers in the summertime, mix it with oil, heat it up, and put it in your ears. And it was good for the earaches that people had, because your eyes, ears, nose, and throat are all connected. Dandelion's an interesting one. Dandelion works for the root, it works for the liver, and that's where anger lives. And it was interesting that, the areas where you don't see that much dandelion are usually peaceful areas, at least in my experience. But then when I lived in Detroit, we had some big dandelions, but they were really like hard leaves. And like interesting, and Detroit's kind of an angry town. I only lived there a year, thank God. But then when I moved in, I was Colombia, South America. I was at altitude of about 9,000 feet. The dandelions were small, had spiky leaves. The stem almost had like a bark on it. The flowers are small, like little buttons, and the root was just like a pretzel. And the whole thing was just bitter. That was the only war zone that I'd been to that had 4 sides: the government, the guerrillas, paramilitary, and the ELN. And that was a very temperamental place. I'll just put it that way. So you can look at the healing herbs in the ground and tell what's going to be the most dominant ailments that you'd be dealing with as a herbologist or a healer or a shaman in an area like that. So back to my boat, I could do more environmental work, take people out for environmental awareness and so on. And by the way, if you'd like to donate to that, you can do that, PayPal at Shaman Hawk. Every donation is appreciated. I should be in the water, launch the boat in the spring. But we do a lot of reef cleanup. And the fact is that you have to. You have to do reef and waterway cleanup. I say waterways and reefs because I'm going to be mostly on the ocean, and probably mostly in South Florida in the summertime. I'll go north. Wintertime, I'll come south. And we have to go take it to places. So it's a lot of Yeah, you're picking up plastic with plastic bags, and you have to take them to someplace that either recycles, sorts them out, or it goes into a landfill. Or in Florida, we say Mount Trashmore. You know, it goes into a, not a landfill, but a dump, and they keep piling dirt on it. We make these little mountains in Florida out of trash and dirt. Clever, huh? But there's no other way to really do that, because when, you know, the other complete thought is when the recycling programs are working, like they had a kind of a scandal in Fort Lauderdale. Waste Management is the company down there that handles the trash, and Waste Management has a contract with their incinerator to burn it. Now, that's a big problem, because they say, oh, well, harmless carbon goes up into the air. Well, carbon likes to link up things, become like benzene, you know, pick up a couple of oxygen molecules, become dioxin, and, you know, now you're just polluting in a different way, a fancy, you know, recycling way, you know. But if they didn't have enough trash to burn, they'd end up burning the stuff that was destined for recycling, because they got to keep those incinerators moving, you know, all the time. And that was part of their contract. And when that came out, like, people were mad because they're paying for recycling that gets burned. Well, that's because the people don't keep the politicians on a short leash and be aware of what's going on with their money. You know, so the bottom line, to, if you want to call it climate change or whatever the new term is, or any type of environmentalism, the person, the average everyday person collectively has to do their part individually to keep the movement on the right track. If not, you can't get mad at the politicians who do whatever they can get away with, you know, or whoever else took advantage of a situation to make some more money or make some excuse about it, and then it gets out of hand. You find out about it later, you know. So support your local farmer. Absolutely support your local farmer, because they're the ones that can provide the produce for you, whether it's fruit, vegetables, grains, or whatever. Provide you with the message. Remember, going back into healing like they did with that rose. So all this genetic stuff that people have been experimented on and all that, you know, the earth can help heal that. And that's just a fact. That's not shamanic, new age, foo-foo stuff. That's a fact. And that consciousness, that earth consciousness, knows what's coming down the line. And it's helping you to prepare for that. And so when you're eating organically or supporting from the farm, growing your own stuff, and there's ways to do it even if you have an apartment or balcony, you know, at least that little bit that you're working with can help get you that information that can connect you with that consciousness network that's out there to let you know what the next move you should do is. Okay? It's really not a big mystery, people. It's really simple if you just get out of the way. So that's enough for now. 18 minutes. I'm going to let you guys go. Like, subscribe, help me get up some followers and all that, so I can spread the good word, and catch you guys later.